Hello, welcome to the channel Why Stories. Enjoy watching.
Gabina, what do you mean you can't? You understand that my mother will be unhappy. She was counting on your help. Gabina herself knew that Idelma would not be pleased. She would be furious. Marcos, I really can't. I feel so bad that I feel like I'm going to faint. Interesting. Why did you start feeling so bad when we were about to go to my mother's house? Gabina was deeply hurt that her husband didn't care about her or her state. On the other hand, Marcos was thinking about his mother, who continued to torment Gabina even after they had moved out. When Marcos and Gabina announced that they were taking out a mortgage with Idelma, she almost had a heart attack. No wonder, after Marcos made Gabina happy by this announcement, all the household chores were handed over to her. She hadn't been particularly concerned with cooking or cleaning before, but now she had given up on everything. Marcos and TV series were all that was left in her life. Well, and a couple of hours to torment Gabina. After they finally moved, Gabina was responsible for cleaning the apartment, which was on the other side of the city. Idelma was a real slob. By the time Gabina arrived, all the dishes were dirty, the leftovers were on the floor. From the dried spots and trash on the table and floor, Gabina could tell that the old woman had cooked recently. Sometimes Gabina felt, although no, she was sure that Idelma deliberately made such a mess so that Gabina would have to work hard. And she tried. What else could she do? She couldn't tell Marcos that she wouldn't go, that would be wrong. Marcos sometimes even apologized to her, although he did it so that his mother wouldn't hear, but that was enough for Gabina, because it was already a feat for Marcos. Marcos, I started feeling bad 2 weeks ago, I endured it, but now I just can't. If you were a little more attentive to your wife, of course you would have noticed everything. Gabina, don't talk nonsense, of course I would have noticed if you were feeling bad. Maybe we'll just postpone it until tomorrow? Of course, Mom won't be very happy, but we're all human. Gabina sighed, how much she wanted to fall asleep and sleep, for a day or two, but no less. She had been wanting to sleep all week. Embarrassingly, she had fallen asleep at her desk twice. Okay, Marcos, but don't promise anything for sure. I don't know how I'll feel tomorrow. Everything will be fine, you'll rest and everything will be okay. Gabina barely went to home and immediately collapsed onto the couch, only managing to take off her coat before falling asleep. She heard Marcos come in with the edge of her ear, heard him clattering pots and pans in displeasure because she hadn't cooked a fresh dinner and he had to eat leftover tomato soup from yesterday. He walked into the room a few times, but Gabina didn't turn around. Marcos sighed loudly and went back to the kitchen, and she fell asleep again, not hearing him settle down. The next morning she woke up as if nothing had happened yesterday. Marcos was right, she just needed some rest. Well, it was okay, she had 2 days off ahead of her, she would catch up on sleep. And then Gabina remembered Idelma. She was about to go back to the room to lie down and say that she wasn't feeling well, but Marcos walked into the kitchen. Gabina, what are you waiting for? Mom has called twice already. Get dressed, we'll have some tea over there. Gabina sighed, arguing or explaining was pointless. She went to get dressed. Passing her husband, she muttered, "Good morning to you too." Marcos looked at her in surprise. What does that mean? Idelma met them on the landing. So, you remembered me after all. Of course, who needs me now? It can take months for you without visiting your mother. Marcos kissed his mother on the cheek. Mom, don't shout. You know we couldn't come yesterday, but it's not my fault. I know, Marcos, it's just sad that your wife will eventually separate us completely. Marcos sighed sadly, and within 3 minutes, they were sitting on the couch with his mother watching TV. Gabina had no choice but to start cleaning. Marcos never even tried to help her. Today it was difficult for her, so difficult that she wanted to cry. She collected the garbage and came back to the room. Marcos, take out the trash, she said. He turned to her and said, That's your job. Gabina felt such anger rising in her heart that it became dark in her eyes, and she repeated, "Take out the trash." Marco stood up, but Idelma sat him back down. "Son, you don't come to see me often. She'll take out the trash herself. Nothing will happen to her." Gabina slowly took off her gloves, folded them neatly, and threw them at her husband. "I'm going home. You'll do the rest without me." She saw her mother-in-law's look. Yes, Gabina was ready to give half of her life for such a look. She quickly got dressed, hearing her mother-in-law's voice getting hysterical in the room. Gabina had to prepare something delicious for her as well. The woman quickly went down the stairs and immediately felt tiredness. What is this? She used to clean 2 apartments and still work, and now she can barely move, no strength left. She decided to go to the park and sit there. Breathe in some fresh air. It's a day off today, why not spend it on herself? Gabina headed decisively towards the park, bought a large ice cream on the way, walked and just smiled. She didn't even notice the man looking at her. He looked and smiled too. Gabina sat on an empty bench, stretched out her legs, and started eating ice cream with pleasure. Her mood improved with each passing second. How nice it is when Idelma and Marcos are not around. Gabina abruptly stopped eating her ice cream. How could that be? So, she feels good when her husband is not around? But that's wrong, it shouldn't be like this, they made a vow. She tried to push away the silly thoughts and went back to her ice cream. Someone sat down next to her. Of course, Gabina wanted to be alone, but on the other hand, the bench was big enough, so there was room for everyone. "You seem to be enjoying it so much that I also wanted some ice cream," said the man who was about 40 years old and smiling. Gabina turned her head in surprise. She hasn't talked to anyone in so long. Home, work, Idelma. The woman was embarrassed and the man laughed. "Don't worry, I won't take your ice cream away. I bought one too," and he showed his large cone. Gabina laughed. She didn't even know how she managed to do it. Gabina immediately became embarrassed and turned away. She didn't want to laugh with a stranger. "Sorry if I'm bothering you." "It's okay, the bench is for everyone." For some time, they ate their ice cream in silence, and Gabina looked at him from the corner of her eye. He was quite handsome, strong, well-dressed, with long fingers, not fragile but strong. She noticed that the man was also looking at her and quickly looked away. "My name is Leandro, and today is my first day off in 2 weeks, and I wanted to spend it wisely." Gabina involuntarily smiled. "Do you think that ice cream will bring a lot of benefits?" The men laughed. "Well, why not? I'm not on a diet, and I rarely eat it, so it's just what I need to lift my mood," he said. "Maybe you're right," she replied. "You haven't told me what is your name?" Gabina immediately scolded herself. Could she not have told him a different name? She wasn't planning on maintaining a relationship with him anyway. "It's a rare name these days," he said. She shrugged. "It's a common one." "Okay, sorry, I have to go." Gabina saw disappointment on the man's face, but she understood that she didn't need any of this. She has a husband, she has a family. She suddenly stood up and felt dizzy. Her speech began to slur, and her legs became weak. The next moment, she lost consciousness and fell under the man's feet. Leandro watched her for a second, then dropped the ice cream and sat down next to her. With one hand, he checked her pulse, and with the other, he called an ambulance. People were running towards them from all sides. Gabina woke up in the evening. She opened her eyes and saw a window. It was sunset in front of her. The woman didn't understand anything. She remembered the park, remembered the man, but how did she end up here, and where was this place? "How do you feel?" She turned her head, and there was the same man in a white coat and hat. "Who are you? Where am I?" Gabina tried to get up, and unimaginable thoughts rushed into her head. They took her somewhere, white coats, that meant they were going to experiment on her. He's some kind of insane, that's why he approached her in the park. But she couldn't stand up. Not only was her head spinning, but she was also nauseous. She weakly leaned back on the pillow. What do you need? Leandro smiled. I don't need anything, but you absolutely need a complete medical examination. For how long do you have such attacks? Sorry, let me introduce myself again. Leandro Perez. I'm a doctor, and you're currently in the hospital. Gabina felt such relief that she even exhaled. Leandro looked at her strangely. What did you think? Well, she couldn't tell him what she thought of him. Now she had already looked at her ward neighbors, some medical equipment, and the windows, which, by the way, had no locks or bars. Nothing. I was just scared. He placed his hand on hers. Don't worry. We will take all the tests now and find out what happened to you. Just tell me, how long have you been feeling unwell? Gabina started talking and was surprised to realize that she had been feeling unwell for a long time, but simply hadn't paid attention to it. But when Leandro started asking probing questions and she started answering them, she became scared. What was happening to her? When he left, Gabina almost started crying. What was she going to do now? What if it was something serious? One of the neighbors in the room sat down next to her. Don't worry, Leandro Perez is the best in our city. If he said he would figure it out, then he will. I'm not worried, Gabina smirked. No one will really cry if something serious happens to me. Well, don't say that. Do you have children? Are they at least not young? No, I don't have children. The neighbor hesitated, then said, Everything will be okay, don't worry. A nurse came for Gabina and asked her to sit in a wheelchair. I'll go myself, Gabina said. You can't, it's an order. When the results will be ready, run along, but not now. The same neighbor waved her hand. Don't argue, sit down. We've all been through this here. Well, if everyone had, then she would go too. Gabina returned to the ward only after 2 hours. Your phone has been ringing 5 times already, said the neighbor in the room. Gabina trembled. She hadn't warned Marcos. Quickly opening her bag, she grabbed the phone just as it started ringing again. Hello. Gabina, have you lost your mind? Where are you? What the hell do you think you're doing? Marcos, don't shout like that. Don't shout? You hurt my mother's feelings. Marcos, I'm in the hospital. In the hospital? And what are you doing there? Can you please tell me? I passed out on the street and they brought me here. For a few seconds, Marcos fell silent, then he asked in a quieter voice, So when are you going home? There's nothing to eat, and you haven't cooked anything for Mom. Gabina was left speechless for a moment, then she said, Marcos, are you even listening to me? I'm telling you I'm in the hospital, I'm sick. Do you understand? Of course I understand, I'm not stupid. I just asked a normal question, when are you coming home? Gabina didn't say anything more, she just turned the phone off, lay down, and turned to the wall. It was so hurtful that tears started rolling down her face. She could hear the neighbors talking to each other, and then someone took her by the shoulder. Stop thinking about sad things, get up, let's go have some tea, the woman said. Gabina got up from the bed, and her stomach growled loudly. One of the women looked at her suspiciously and asked, Have you eaten today? Gabina shrugged and said, Ice cream. No wonder you passed out. Let me make you a good sandwich, the woman said. She was only a little older than Gabina, and her name was Samantha. Samantha was cheerful, petite, and full-figured. Looking at her, it seemed like she had no problems, and any problems she did see just scattered away. She was a bundle of positivity. I'm Valencia, said the other neighbor. I have a salad, they only brought it in the evening, I haven't even put it in the fridge yet. It wasn't even 5 minutes before the chairs were moved between the beds and an improvised table was set up from the chairs. When the water boiled, Samantha pulled out a kettle and said, "We drink coffee in the evenings, otherwise if Leandro catches a whiff of it in the morning, we'll all have to answer to him. He's treating our blood pressure, and we don't want to go home." Samantha laughed. Gabina enjoyed the sandwich so much that Samantha asked, "Do you want another one?" No, I'm full." It was really delicious. They sat for a long time. Gabina found out that Valencia has 3 children and a husband who likes to drink, but still works and whom Valencia loves. Samantha has 1 daughter, with whom she constantly argues because of the teenage age, but her husband is good. What about you? I also have a husband and his mother. How is that? Well, we live separately, but it seems to me that Idelma is always with us. Samantha sighed. You should have put my mother-in-law in her place from the beginning. My mother-in-law also turned my husband against me. Once, they both angered me. She came to visit and sat with my husband. And they were discussing me. That I don't clean the house well or cook poorly. I couldn't take it anymore, so I hit my husband with a frying pan on his back and told his mother to take her son away, otherwise I could level her back too. We have been living soul to soul with her for 12 years, and we still laugh together, remembering that incident. Valencia laughed. Samantha, you'll teach her. And then they'll put her in jail. My mother-in-law was good right away. She knows perfectly well that if I don't hold her son in iron fists, then it's all over for him. Gabina listened and smiled. Here are 2 women sitting in front of her, both quarrel with their husbands, but with such love, and it is clear that their husbands are good. The salad was clearly made by the husband, everything was cut large and crooked, but he did it to feed his wife, to please her. In the morning, someone knocked on the door of the room. Valencia and Samantha looked at each other in surprise. Their husbands were at work at this time. Gabina shouted, "Come in." Marcos walked into the room. "Hello." He approached Gabina's bed and sat down. Then he kissed her on the cheek. He looked confused. "I was waiting for you yesterday, waiting." "Marcos, I told you I'm in the hospital." "And what does the doctor say?" "Nothing yet. The test results will be ready, and then he will tell me." "When will they be ready?" Marcos seemed to be a parrot. Gabina was tired of his one-word questions, so she closed her eyes. Her husband looked at her bewilderedly, catching the glances of her neighbors. He said, "Gabina, can I bring you anything? Just tell me what you need." "I need slippers and some things." "I'll write them down for you," Gabina replied. Marcos pulled out a piece of paper. "Call me as soon as you find out when you'll be able to go home," he said. "Okay," Gabina agreed. As Marcos was leaving the hospital room, he turned around and said, "Gabina, call my mom and apologize to her." "For what?" Gabina asked, surprised. "What do you mean, for what? You left without saying goodbye." "Marcos, it won't be hard for you to do it," he insisted before walking out. Gabina stared at the door as her neighbors approached her. "Don't be upset. Men are so helpless without their wives," they said. Gabina sighed. "Maybe it's a good thing that I ended up in the hospital. Looking at Marcos now, I don't understand why I didn't see all of this before. We don't have any children. You know why? At first, we lived with his mom. She immediately said no children or we'll end up on the streets. Then we got a mortgage for an apartment. I won't tell you what it took for me to convince Marcos to take this step. But we moved. And now we still can't have children because of the mortgage. Raising a child takes a lot of money. And I understand that he's just repeating his mom's words, but I don't know how to change his mind. I'm 33 now, but I finally understand who Marcos and his mom really are. What am I supposed to do? The chance of having a child is already minimal, and now in this situation. Valencia sighed. You know what? Women give birth at 40 and start a new life at 45. Oh, what new life? Gabina said. I'm used to be with him, and he's not a bad guy. His mom just messed up his brain. Samantha laughed. No, my dear, you need to stay in the hospital a little longer, maybe ask them to heal your head some more. Gabina laughed too. It didn't seem as scary with a smile. The next day, Marcos brought everything on the list and fish pies. Gabina smiled sadly. Did his mom bake these? Yes, she did her best, Marcos replied. Of course, Idelma knew that Gabina couldn't stand fish and would be nauseous if she ate it. Say thank you to your mom, Gabina said. Of course, I'll. Well, can I go now? Go ahead, Marcos. Is there any news about the results yet? No, the doctor said the results should be done tomorrow. In the evening, Gabina went for a walk in the hospital park. Although she felt weak, she was already feeling much better. She walked down the deserted path and sat down on a bench, lost in thought. She had met Marcos in the cafeteria, where she often went to eat lunch. Marcos had sat down at her table because there were no other seats free. Excuse me, can I sit at your table? He had asked. He was a handsome guy, and Gabina had smiled and nodded. Somehow they had started talking. It turned out that Marcos worked at the same factory as her, one floor above where their bosses sat. Marcos was in charge of product distribution. That same evening, when Gabina left work, Marcos was already waiting for her. They never parted ways after that and spent nights at Gabina's small rented apartment. And then Marcos said, Gabina, I have two favorite women, you and my mother. It's very hard for me to choose between you. Maybe we should get married and move in with me? Of course. Gabina was not expecting such a proposal but was overjoyed. Marcos was perfect in her eyes. Who else did she see in her village? Nobody. The decent guys had all left their little town, leaving only those who didn't care about themselves. The village was dying fast. When Gabina also planned to leave after her grandmother's death, half of the houses were already abandoned. Here you go, Gabina was startled. She had been so lost in her memories that she had forgotten where she was. Leandro was sitting next to her, wearing a white coat and a jacket over it, handing her an ice cream cone. We didn't have any waffle cones, just bowls, he said. Gabina couldn't help but smile. She took the ice cream, opened it, and took a bite. Leandro, you're a wizard. Where did you find ice cream at this time? I bought it on my way to work this morning, but I don't know why. Maybe I was hoping to lure you out for a walk with ice cream. Gabina laughed out loud. I would have gone anyway. Well, women are unpredictable creatures. Don't you know that any person lying in a hospital just dreams of escaping to the street for at least 5 minutes? Well, I know, but what if it didn't work out, and ice cream is serious business? Gabina was eating ice cream and thinking that she had never tasted anything more delicious. Leandro was looking at her, his heart squeezing with pity and frustration for the unfairness of life. The results of the tests had come in just an hour ago. He had suspected something like this, but he didn't think it would be this bad. He immediately called his friend, who was also a doctor, but in a completely different field. Leandro, I looked at what you sent me. I'll tell you right away, if miracles happen, then only a miracle can save this woman. Is it really that bad? Very bad. You see, with this kind of situation, every time she gets worse again, she may not be able to recover. She'll get weaker every day. Raphael, what should I do? I don't understand. Who is she for you? Nobody, just an acquaintance. Leandro's voice trembled betrayingly. Wait, I don't understand. Our steadfast tin soldier has surrendered? Leandro chuckled. Raphael, stop it. But he really was known as the steadfast tin soldier in their group of friends, which consisted entirely of doctors. Leandro was still unmarried. He always said that he wasn't going to get married in principle. No matter how many girlfriends his friends' wives brought to parties, no matter how many times they tried to set him up, it was all without result. Leandro was alone. Listen, I'm not going to promise anything, but I'll call someone tomorrow, forward the test results, and maybe he'll say something else. Now Leandro was looking at Gabina and didn't understand how to tell her that she had 2 to 3 months left to live. Unless a miracle happened, and as a doctor, he knew that miracles don't happen. Gabina, do you have a dream? She looked at him in surprise. Well, some childhood dream. You know, I always dreamed that when I grew up, regardless of what I became, I would skydive. And how's that? Everything went well with the skydiving, not even a single mistake. I even volunteered to join the army. I didn't have to go. I've skydived enough, it'll last me a lifetime. She paused and thought. I don't know. When I was little, I dreamed of getting a big dog when I grew up. A really big one. But my grandmother didn't like dogs, so we only had a cat. Leandro looked at her with interest. Have you still not fulfilled your dream? She shrugged her shoulders. No. A dog, like a child, requires care and attention, and we are always at work. And besides, keeping a big dog in an apartment is cruel to the animal. Yes, you're right. You need to have at least a country house. Gabina smiled. We have one. Although it's almost 100 kilometers from the city. We've only been there a couple of times. Then my husband said that he's not interested in living outside of civilization, so the house just sits there and used. It's hard to sell because I grew up there, but it's far to travel. Leandro decided not to say anything about what he was thinking today. Let her rest and sleep, and tomorrow he'll have to tell her everything. When Marcos arrived, Leandro immediately appeared in the room. Excuse me, are you Gabina's husband? Yes, I am. What's happened? Could you come with me? When the men left, Samantha turned to Valencia. What was that about? You saw how much time our doctor spent with Gabina outside yesterday, right? Of course, I saw. Do you think it means something? Of course. Our Leandro has fallen in love with Gabina. And since he's an honest man, he'll probably tell Marcos about it now. How does Gabina feel about Leandro? Who knows? We haven't talked about anything like that. Just in the middle of the conversation, Gabina appeared in the room again. She was going to take some tests. What are you two arguing about? Is my husband gone already? Oh, Gabina, it would be better if your husband had run away. She looked at them in surprise. What happened? And you speak without riddles? What? The doctor took Marcos aside to talk to him. He'll tell him everything, like I love her, I'll fight for her. Gabina sat on the bed. What if it's true? What if that's how it all is? She jumped up. Where did they go? We don't know, but Leandro invited Marcos to his office. Gabina flew out of the ward and rushed to Leandro's office. She opened the door, but the men didn't notice her. Marcos was saying, "This just can't be. She never complained about anything. You probably just didn't notice. Her fatigue must have been going on for at least 6 months. Doctor, how much time does she have left? 3, maybe 2 months. So little. Will she have to walk on her own all this time? I can't say. Every loss of consciousness can end up with her lying down. We need to make sure she doesn't get too nervous." Gabina immediately understood that they were talking about her. She realized that very soon she would pass away, and she lost consciousness. Leandro raised his head at the knock and jumped up. Gabina. She opened her eyes. She was in her own room. Marcos sat next to the bed, looking frightened, and Leandro stood at the foot of the bed. Gabina, we need to talk. You have to pull yourself together. She sat on the bed. Marcos, I want to go home. Well, Gabina, what am I going to do with you at home? I have work to do. I won't be able to be around all the time. It was clear that the idea of being around Gabina wasn't very pleasant for Marcos. You don't need to be around me. I'll be fine on my own. When I can't get up anymore, you can take me to a hospice or something. But, Marcos, I want to go home. Leandro intervened. Gabina, don't lose your mind. You need to get treatment. You need to use every chance. She looked him straight in the eye. Are there many of these chances? Leandro looked away. She stood up and started gathering her things. Samantha rushed to help her. Valencia couldn't, sitting in the corner and fighting back tears. When everything was packed, Gabina looked at her neighbors and smiled. Well, let's farewell. They hugged her, and Samantha said, Why farewell? I'm sure we'll see each other again. Gabina smiled sadly. In the afterlife. Gabina. Okay, I'm quiet. At home, Gabina immediately lay down. She missed everything about home and her husband in particular. But Marcos tried not to touch her, not even to reach out. He made up a bed for himself in the big room. Gabina wiped away her tears. Well, what could she do? She was no longer welcome to him. She hardly slept at night. She could hear Marcos talking to someone on the phone. Then she heard, Mom, how are you? It was clear, Mommy was offering ways to get rid of Gabina, but honestly, she didn't care. Let him take her to the forest, it didn't matter. A day earlier, a day later, it wasn't such a big deal to fight over it. She had already fallen asleep by morning. When she woke up, Marcos wasn't home. She just made herself some tea, and someone rang the doorbell. Gabina didn't even move. After a few more rings, the key turned in the lock, and Idelma appeared on the kitchen threshold. Gabina, I thought you were sleeping. Hello, Idelma. Hello, she said, pursing her lips mournfully. How are you feeling? Fine. How could this happen, Gabina? Marcos married you, and you've given him such a surprise. You're supposed to be healthy since you're from the countryside. Why did you do this to my son? Now he has to take care of you, he works, and I can't, you know my age. Idelma spoke while making herself tea, pulling out butter, sausage, and making herself a sandwich. What do you mean take care of me? I can take care of myself for now. For now exactly. And then what? You'll ruin the boy's life. Idelma, I don't understand what you want from me. Do you want me to go live in the dump? This is also my apartment, Marcos and I split the rent. If he doesn't like something, he can come to you and live there until everything is sorted out. And then we'll have to renovate the whole apartment. Why waste money unnecessarily? It hurt Gabina so much, it was so offensive. She's not even dying yet, and Idelma, without any shame, talks about her death and what will happen afterwards. Idelma, would you please leave here? The elderly woman pouted offendedly, grabbed her jacket, but still couldn't just walk away. You know what I'll tell you, Gabina? You don't really care anymore, you won't be able to help yourself. But you should think about your husband, why spoil his life? Don't be selfish, don't think about how to ruin his life, but think about being remembered with kind words. She stormed out and slammed the door loudly, while Gabina covered her face with her hands. How could this be? Why is everything different for other people? She understood perfectly well that her mother-in-law wouldn't calm down. Gabina just sat in the kitchen until evening, not caring about anything. She heard Marcos come in, walk into the kitchen, greet her, and look into the pots. Gabina thought she could have cooked something, but the conversation with her mother-in-law had thrown her off balance. She silently went into the room, lay down, and immediately fell asleep. She woke up because Marcos was talking on the phone again. Mom, how can I tell this to her? And no one has been in that house for so long. Mom, I understand that she doesn't care anymore. But how do I tell her? No, Mom, I'll do it myself. He hung up the phone, turned around and saw Gabina in the doorway. Did you hear everything? Mom, and I think you should go to your village. There's fresh air and everything. Gabina looked at him and didn't understand how she could have married him in the first place. It's simply unjustly to send a person to die somewhere far away. Gabina perfectly understood what kind of life was waiting for her here. She would constantly see the eyes that would ask her when she would free them. She wanted to live these months differently, even if it was only 2 or 3 months. Marcos, if I bother you here, you can take me to the dump. Gabina, why are you exaggerating? We're not talking about a dump. You have a nice house there, neighbors, you'll breathe fresh air, drink milk. I'll come to visit you. She laughed. You want to get rid of me and at the same time say that you'll come to visit me, trying to calm me down enough to agree? And I'll agree anyway. I don't have the strength to see your faces, yours and your mother's. Gabina went back into the room, lay down, and turned away to the wall. Why is it happening to her? Why? In the morning, Marcos woke her up. Gabina, wake up, we need to go. Where to? She looked at him in surprise. Where? To the village. But I haven't even packed my things. Don't worry, I packed everything for you. She smiled. Can I at least have some tea? Gabina, why do you do this? I bought you groceries too. He looked at her as if waiting for praise. But Gabina wanted to hit him. The whole way he kept talking about how good it would be for her there, how he would often come to bring her everything she needed. As if he wanted to convince not only himself, but also Gabina. She was sure that as soon as Marcos left, she would never see him again. The village greeted them on a beautiful spring morning. The sun shone so brightly that Marcos had to take out his sunglasses. Gabina smiled. He was quite handsome, a real man, at least that's what he looked like. No one would think he was taking his wife away from home to die. So she wouldn't get in his way. Marcos stopped the car at the house. Marcos quickly carried the bags to the house, while Gabina just stood there. I guess you're not even going to come in? Gabina, I have to go to work, you know that. I'll visit you in a few days. Marcos leaned in for a kiss, but Gabina pushed him away. Go, don't waste your time on me. Gabina, why do you do this? You'll see, you'll be much better off here. Gabina smiled behind Marcos's back. He ran to the car, as if Gabina was some kind of plague. The car disappeared, raising a cloud of dust, and Gabina went into the house. Strangely enough, she really did feel good. The door opened willingly, and Gabina squeezed through the narrow passage because the bags didn't allow the door to open wider. She always loved everything on the shelves, and now she was pleased to see the perfect order in the house, covered in a layer of dust. Well, it's not a big deal. She didn't need to do anything major, just wipe everything down and clean. She even brought her own bedding, or rather, Marcos had put it there for her. Hey, do you need any help, owners? I'm willing to help for a small symbolic fee. I just need to have a drink. The door opened and a scruffy man appeared on the threshold. Gabina looked at him, realizing that she knew him exactly, but couldn't understand who he was. Gabina, is that you? The man looked bewildered at her, spreading the alcohol vapors around him. Victor? She widened her eyes. It's me. What are you doing here? Victor was her classmate and a troublemaker. It was clear back then that nothing good would come out of him. The local police officer went to his house as if it was his job. Yet, everyone respected Victor. He may have been a troublemaker, but he was fair. I just arrived. For how long? I don't know, Victor, maybe a month, 2, 3. He looked at her strangely. You're talking as if you came to die. That's right. He looked stunned. Victor, Are you married? Of course. To Sabina. Do you remember her? Oh, I remember. She was constantly crazy about you. Yes, we have 3 kids. 3? You're a hero. Victor skillfully sat down on the couch, waving his hand. Oh, come on, a hero? I drink too much. And I drink to not see in what poverty my family lives, and I can't do anything about it. You understand? Nothing. There's no work, no money, so at least I get drunk, and we live off of what we have. What about the city? What city, Gabina? With 3 kids, you need to rent a big apartment, and it costs a fortune. I have to earn enough money to pay for the apartment and then be left without anything again. Well, we need to come up with something. Victor, you always manage to make things work. We thought, there are such breeds of chickens, although I'll tell you later, there's still no money for all of that. What about you? Gabina sat next to him. There's nothing to tell. Married, no kids, got sick. My husband brought me here so as not to take care of me. Victor laughed. Well, you're a good joker, but Gabina remained silent. The smile slipped from his face. Gabina, are you serious? She nodded and finally burst into tears. Victor awkwardly patted her shoulder. Don't cry. Do you want me to go get Sabina and we can come have some tea? We'll talk and remember everything. Gabina nodded, then looked around the house. And we'll help with the cleaning. I'll just bring your bags in. Gabina smiled a little. And how about you get drunk? Oh, that's only when there's nothing else to do, and right now we have plenty to do. In a minute, Victor had moved all of Gabina's belongings. Make yourself comfortable, and I'll run home and back. He left, and Gabina started unpacking her bags. What a caring husband she had. He had even packed all of her cosmetics and jewelry so carefully. Probably so nothing would remind him of her. Gabina took out 3 pink plush rabbits. They always sat on her bed as a decorative touch. The rabbits looked the same, but were different sizes. Gabina hugged the toys to herself, then tossed them on the couch. That's it, time to say goodbye to the past. About an hour later, voices were heard in the courtyard. Gabina went outside. Hi, Gabina. Sabina was looking at her. Gabina remembered her like this, chubby, short, and with a big smile. They hugged, and Sabina started talking quickly. And Victor told me about you, and I thought he was completely drunk, but he spoke so convincingly that I had to come see for myself. And here you are. Why are you crying? Stop it. Look who I brought with me. Gabina looked at the 3 girls in amazement. They were about 2 years apart in age, all of them resembling Victor, but with something of Sabina's as well. Wow, you guys are amazing. A whole kingdom of princesses. Well, we can do it quite well, Victor laughed, and Sabina gave him a look that immediately made him serious. They stayed at Gabina's until evening, preparing and eating meals in the courtyard, cleaning and washing up. To be honest, Gabina hadn't felt this good in a long time. She didn't have to endure hidden insults disguised as kind words, she could just be herself. The girls turned out to be wonderful helpers. Gabina saw how they looked at the plush bunnies, and when it was time to go home, she solemnly handed them over, handing them out by height. But the older girl immediately gave the biggest bunny to the younger one and took a smaller one for herself. The little one jumped for joy, and Gabina almost cried. That's how it should be, not everyone just living for themselves. In the evening, Victor heated up the sauna and came for Gabina. Let's go, Sabina will steam you up. Oh, Victor, wait, let me take something tasty for the girls. She unloaded all the candy into a bag, then took a sausage stick out of the fridge. There was nothing else interesting. Marcos had bought everything necessary. Well, he's in for a big surprise when he dives into the box where they've been saving money for a new car. She'll buy the girls some treats later. They sat until midnight. Sabina esteemed her so much that at first Gabina had trouble breathing, but then a lightness appeared in her body. She asked Victor about their plans. You see, we have a place where we can sell a lot of broilers at once. We already transport ours, but the chickens, they are small in weight, and there's a breed that gets huge in 3 months. But we need money to do this. We need to buy chicks, create conditions for them to hatch eggs themselves, build them pens, buy feed. Well, I can build it myself. It's just that, it's all just dreams. Have you even calculated it? Sabina brought out a notebook. Look, this is if we sell them wholesale. And this? Well, that's a dream. That's if we open our own stand in the city with homemade products. Sabina, how much do we need? I even counted with a margin. Well, it's not that much. Sabina closed the notebook. Yes, it's not that much, but we don't even have that. There's no work here, and our benefits and my salary go towards clothes and food. So it's all just dreams. I'm not giving it up. I'm still thinking, maybe we'll get lucky. At night, they walked her home. However, Sabina asked at first, Gabina, maybe you could stay overnight? No, Sabina, thank you. I need to get used to my own home. She was so tired, but the tiredness was pleasant. As soon as Gabina's head touched the pillow, she fell asleep. She dreamed of chickens all night, many fat, beautiful chickens. She was herding them. It was so strange to herd chickens, and Gabina was having so much fun in her dream. She woke up with a smile on her face. She thought she had woken up on her own, but it turned out that someone was knocking on the door. Gabina put on her robe and went to open it. Hello, 3 girls, her neighbor's daughters, were standing at the door. Hello, come in. We won't stay long. The oldest daughter put the bag on the table. Mom sent milk, sour cream, and something else. Put everything out and give us back the bag. We'll take it to Mom. Gabina smiled. It was true that in the village, containers were always valued. For milk you bring a jar, for apples, a bag. When the girls ran away, Gabina wondered how she didn't know Sabina well at all. Well, she was closer to Victor. Everything was going wrong for them, but someone had sent her a whole bag of food. How was that possible? The phone on the table vibrated, and Gabina jumped. It was so unusual to hear it here, she reached out. Of course, it was Marcos. He probably saw that she had no money. Hello. Gabina, how could you do this? Why did you take the money? Oh, Marcos, hello. I will also file a lawsuit for the division of the apartment in court. In 2 months, I will probably get what's mine. For what division? Are you drunk? What division of property? Well, what division? We paid for the mortgage equally. You kicked me out of the apartment, and it's half mine. You know I always keep all the receipts in order. You wouldn't dare. He spoke not impulsively, but perplexedly. I will dare. You'll see, you buried me too soon. Oh, too soon. I will do so much more. Gabina disconnected, and only now did she realize what she had to do, and what she was going to do was very right. She reached the bottom of the bag and pulled out a small package, counted the money from the package. It was about half of what was in there. Gabina smirked, put a few more bills in her pocket, and hid the remaining money under the couch. When she was little, she had a hiding place there. Sabina was in the yard, weeding the flower bed, and the girls were spinning around. Someone was helping, and someone was hindering. Hi. Sabina turned around. Oh, Gabina, hi. Did you sleep well? Great. Sabina, where's Victor? He's somewhere in the garden. He's so upset. Well, he's worried about you and hasn't been drinking for the 2nd day now. Gabina smiled and turned to the girls. Go call your dad. I need to talk to him and your mom, she said. Sabina looked at her with surprise. Has something happened? No, don't worry, nothing bad has happened, Gabina reassured her. 5 minutes later, they were all sitting at the table. Sabina poured tea for everyone, while Gabina put money on the table. "Here, this is for your business, for your chickens," she said. Victor and Sabina looked at the money. "Gabina, we really appreciate what you're doing, but we can't accept the money. We won't have a way to pay it back if something goes wrong," Victor said. Gabina felt that, despite his shortcomings, Victor was still the head of the family, and no one doubted that. Sabina nodded in agreement with her husband's words. "That's not up for discussion. And besides, who are you going to give it back to? I won't be here. I have no heirs. I'm giving this to you from the bottom of my heart. Please don't hurt me. Take it. You have no idea how it feels to know that you've made someone a little happier in the last days of your life." For a while, the spouses were silent. Then Victor said, "Gabina, honestly, you have no idea what you've done for us. Don't worry, everything will work out." Victor jumped up, hugged Gabina, then Sabina, then picked up all the girls at once and spun them around the room. "Sabina, Gabina, we'll make it, and we'll definitely have a boy." Sabina laughed. "No, stop it, we have enough children already." "No, we don't have enough. We must have a son," Victor said. Gabina looked at them and realized that this was happiness. The happiness of being able to be happy, not trying to learn how to be happy, not pretending to be happy. Leandro was staring at one point. Life had taken a strange turn. He had met a woman for whom he was willing to do the most reckless things, but she had left. She didn't even try to be different, didn't even try to take a step towards her happiness. And yet, Leandro had seen how she looked at him. He knew for sure that she had feelings for him too. Yes, he was a doctor, and he understood. He had seen many times how illness broke people, first morally and then physically. And people gave up even in those cases when they could and should fight. Gabina broke down immediately. She didn't even ask if anything could be done. She just left with a doomed look. The phone rang on the table. "Yes, hello. Leandro, I have great news for you." "Hello, Raphael. What news?" "Remember you sent me the test results for that woman, your friend?" "Of course, I do." Leandro felt his heart beating faster. "Well, I sent them to a friend of mine. He's working with similar cases. Their clinic is now enrolling patients for experimental treatment. He's sure your friend has a chance. You need to send her data urgently to get her enrolled. Well, she needs to come to the clinic." Leandro remained silent. "Leandro, why are you silent?" "She left, went home to her husband, said she didn't need anything." "And her husband just gave up like that?" "He didn't even try to persuade her." "Leandro, I don't understand you. As far as I understood, you care about her. So what? Are you just going to sit and do nothing? What do you suggest I do?" "What do I suggest? Go and save her, it's all in your hands. If she doesn't want it, make her." Leandro listened and realized that he was indeed an idiot. He didn't care even if Gabina never reciprocated his feelings. He would save her, he would at least know that she was alive. "Raphael, give me the data, I'll find her." "Great. Dictate, I'm writing it down." Leandro has already come and rang the doorbell 3 times. It's strange that for normal people, the workday ends at 6, maybe 8, and it's already 10, but nobody is opening the door. He sat down on the windowsill in the stairwell again. It's no big deal, he'll wait, he may even have to spend the night here. 15 minutes later, he heard footsteps. Leandro stood up, but it was a woman. She suspiciously looked him over and began to open the door next to Gabina's door. "Excuse me, can I ask you a few questions?" he said. The woman stepped back in fear. "Don't worry, I'm a doctor. Your neighbor Gabina was under my care. You see, she's expected at a good clinic, so there's hope for a successful outcome, but I can't find her." "Gabina is sick?" Are you serious? The woman asked. Very serious. I see, and here I was thinking that Marcos was up to something, that he sent her somewhere, and there's some business with the apartment. He took her away? Where did he take her? Leandro asked. I don't know. I saw her in the morning, through the window, as he loaded her bags. Many bags, so he took her for a long time. Leandro sighed. You see, Gabina is staying, just a little longer. The sooner I find her, the more chances she has to get better. Where could he have taken her? The neighbor shook her head in disappointment. I don't know, honestly. Oh, Marcos, he's a rascal. It's all his mother's doing. But wait, of course, I have an idea. Gabina has a house in the countryside somewhere far away. I just can't remember what the village is called. I had it written down somewhere. Wait, let me look for it. She went into the room, and Leandro impatiently shifted his weight. That's right, Gabina said she had a country house. She must be there. She has to be there. The neighbor came back. Look, I found it. She handed him a piece of paper torn from a notebook. He read the name of the village. Thank you very much. You're welcome. Hope she's there. Hope everything is okay. Please tell her, if you find her, that her husband has something planned with the apartment. I'll tell her. I'll definitely tell her. He almost ran down the stairs. If he leaves right now, he can get to the clinic by morning. Leandro stopped in the middle of the village. But what to do? It was already dark. The houses were still lit, but he didn't want to be met with weapons or pitchforks. He wasn't very familiar with village life, even though he had always been drawn to living in such places. There was nothing to do but knock on someone's door. He pulled up closer to one of the houses, and a shadow immediately separated from the gate. It was a huge dog, and he barely had time to sit in the car and close the door. Okay, let's try another place, but the dogs have spread throughout the village. Leandro decided he would drive up to every house. Maybe someone would come out, or the dogs wouldn't be there. Sabina, Gabina, and Victor were sitting at the table. They were calculating and thinking, and Victor had almost finished building the corral and feeders. He was unrecognizable, having shaved and not drunk for over a week. Gabina saw the look Sabina was giving her husband and thought to herself that they would definitely have a son. Well, it looks like everything's done. We've double-checked everything 5 times already, Sabina said plaintively, looking at her husband. He smiled. We'll sleep later. Gabina, are you coming with us? Maybe you need something in the city? No, I won't go, but I'll make a list. Well, okay. You'll keep an eye on the girls, right? Gabina laughed. They're keeping an eye on me, so I'm under reliable protection. They take care of me, make me eat, take me out for fresh air. Victor smiled. His girls really took care of Gabina. They looked after her like she was a little girl, whether because they had overheard a conversation about Gabina not having much time left or because they just liked her. But they wouldn't let her out of their sight. Sabina turned to the window. The dogs are barking like a wolf has come. What wolf? There haven't been any wolves in our village for 10 years, Victor said. Look, some car has stopped, Sabina said. I'll go take a look. Victor. Sabina, calm down and stop watching detective series. Victor went outside, and the women listened for what was happening, but they heard nothing. It had been 10 minutes, and Victor still hadn't returned. I'm going outside. Gabina stood up as well and said, I'm coming with you. Without speaking, they each took a heavy stick and headed towards the door. They had only gone a short distance when the door opened and Victor and Leandro looked at them in surprise, not at them, but at what they were holding in their hands. Victor was the first to break the silence, laughing so hard that he bent it in half, and then Leandro joined in. The women stood there silently, with Sabina looking down at the floor and Gabina staring wide-eyed at Leandro. Leandro, what are you doing? How did you end up here? Gabina asked, still bewildered. I came for you, Gabina, he replied after laughing. For me? I don't understand, Gabina said. Victor pushed Leandro into the house and said to Sabina, brew us some tea or coffee. We have a good man visiting us. Sabina quickly set the table, while Gabina thought about how much she had wanted to see him. But now that he was here, she felt so heavy-hearted that she wished she hadn't seen him at all. She didn't want to die anymore. Soon everyone was seated at the table, and Leandro began to speak. Gabina, the thing is that I have a lot of friends in the medical field. We studied together, and some of us met through work. We all communicate and try to help each other. When we received your test results, I immediately sent them to a friend of mine who specializes in your field. He said what I already knew, but he suggested showing them to another acquaintance. Anyway, that acquaintance is recruiting a group of patients for experimental treatment. As you can imagine, it's a risk, but it's also a chance, a good chance. I took the liberty of enrolling you, and then I rushed to your house, but you weren't there. Thank you to our neighbor for telling us where you might be. By the way, she asked me to tell you that your husband is planning to do something with the apartment, but I don't know what. You have to be at the clinic tomorrow at 8 a.m., or they'll give your place to someone else. There was silence at the table. Gabina felt so strange. She was supposed to die, but now she was being told that there was a chance. She wanted to believe it so badly, but she also thought about what would happen if the treatment didn't work. She thought about the disappointment that would come with it. Everyone was silent, as if they understood the struggle going on within her. Finally, Gabina raised her head and said, I will go, of course, I will go. Victor breathed a sigh of relief and said, if you had refused, I would have personally tied you up and taken you there myself. So my dear, we need to gather ourselves and get some rest for a couple of hours. Gabina, we need to leave by 4 a.m., so let's get ready. We'll come to escort you. Sabina and Victor escorted Leandro and Gabina to the car. Gabina got into the car and immediately felt embarrassed. Yes, she was sick, but she was still a woman. She was extremely attracted to Leandro, and they were going to spend a short but intense night together. She quickly gathered all the necessary things, made the sofa for Leandro, turned around to tell him he could lie down, and by this moment he was standing right behind her. Gabina herself did not understand how she ended up in his arms. They didn't get to sleep. They went out into the street at 4 o'clock in the morning. While Leandro was packing her things, Sabina took her aside. Gabina, you are glowing. Is it what I think it is? Gabina nodded shyly, and Sabina suddenly became serious. Gabina, I'm so happy for you, you have no idea. Please remember that there is always a meaning in life. You have to fight, for yourself, for him, do you hear me? Gabina looked firmly into her new friend's eyes. I will fight with all my might, I promise. They hugged tightly and Gabina got into the car. Victor approached her, looked into the window. Leandro says the treatment will last about 6 months. Don't worry, we'll keep an eye on the house. You'll just come back to open our store. Gabina laughed. I can't miss such an event, I'll definitely come back, we'll come back together. They were silent all the way to the city. Gabina couldn't talk, she only asked Leandro when they stopped at the hospital in the city. I don't know what will happen next, or if there will be anything left, but I'm asking for your help. I want to file for divorce and for the division of property, even if it doesn't help me. I want to leave this world as a free person. Of course, I'll help. But nobody will leave, we still have so much ahead of us. Gabina was immediately admitted to the hospital. Her attending physician, Inocencio Jimenez, looked like a crazy person, but then again, all geniuses do. There were 2 other women in the room with her. They didn't call him anything other than a genius. It was already the 2nd week of her hospital stay. Gabina sent all the divorce papers to Leandro a long time ago. She wrote that she could not come in person because of her illness and confirmed everything with certificates. Leandro said that a state lawyer would be present at the hearing, although he was not really needed. It was all clear. She didn't want to see Marcos or his mother, and she asked not to tell them where she was. It turned out that Marcos decided to sue for the apartment. It was all dragging on, and Gabina understood it perfectly. If she dies before the trial, the apartment will go to him. The door opened, but Gabina didn't stop reading her book because Leandro wouldn't come today. He was on duty, and no one else would come to visit her. "Look at her, as if we have nothing to do with her," someone said. Gabina looked up and almost screamed when she saw Samantha and Valencia standing in front of her. "Girls, oh my God, what are you doing here?" She hugged and kissed them, and the girls started unpacking everything they had brought with them. "Why did you bring so much? I'll never eat all of this. And how did you know I was here? If you can't eat it all alone, you have to share it with your neighbors." Valencia came to see Leandro, and he told her where you were and what was going on with you. "She called me, and we still communicate after the hospital. And here we are." "Leandro didn't tell me anything," Gabina said. The women exchanged glances. Gabina blushed. "Well, we're together. I don't know how much time I have left, but I'm very happy." Samantha patted her hand. "It was clear from the beginning that you were made for each other, and there was no need to resist. So, tell us everything." They talked for 2 hours. By the way, Valencia said that her brother has his own dining room and he'll definitely be happy to buy homegrown chickens. You know, he has homemade food there, but finding all this homemade food in the city is very difficult. Talk to them and let's call each other tomorrow. "Oh, Valencia, that would be great." The next day, Gabina, like an experienced advertiser, described over the phone to Victor all the benefits of such cooperation. Then she hung up the phone, satisfied, and said to herself, "Well, Gabina, your life has been quite active lately. There wasn't even half of this activity before." And in the morning, Inocencio Jimenez came. "Well, ladies, are you ready? Starting tomorrow, we will begin treatment. Each of you will have your own course. Gabina, you will get the toughest one. You must be prepared for the fact that you will want to depart to the other world as soon as you feel bad. There is too little time, you understand? Therefore, we will treat you aggressively. What is required of you is patience and faith. I'm telling you now so you don't forget later. You will feel so bad that the thought of food will be disgusting, but you are simply obliged to keep going. If you have no strength, your body won't be able to handle it. Are you ready?" "Yes," she looked at him, "I'm ready for anything." "It's great." By evening of the next day, Gabina had a good understanding of what Inocencio Jimenez had told her. The other girls were not doing any better, she could see that. But together it was somehow easier. Leandro came almost every day. He sat by her bedside and told her funny stories. Sometimes, when she drifted off to sleep out of exhaustion, he just stayed silent and watched her. Gabina was literally drying up. It seemed like her skin would become transparent soon. 2 months had passed since the beginning of the treatment. The deadline that fate had given her had already passed, and that gave her hope. After some time, the treatment became less extensive, and Gabina was even able to rest. It was already autumn outside, and she slowly approached the window. How beautiful! Leandro promised to take her outside today. She wasn't yet able to make the journey herself. In the morning there would be tests and a full examination. It would be a few more days before they knew anything. "Gabina, are you ready?" She turned around. Leandro was already in the room, with a wheelchair in front of him. "The carriage is ready." Gabina suddenly remembered how she resisted a similar wheelchair when she first arrived at the hospital. Now she didn't care, as long as she could get outside. She took a deep breath. How wonderful! Gabina. The woman opened her eyes, and Leandro handed her an ice cream cone with a smile. No way. Yes. A cone, like the ones we ate when we first met. Marco sat at the table and listened to what his mother was saying. She just wouldn't stop talking. I don't understand, honestly, I don't understand why you're not doing anything. Mom, what do you think I should do? He sighed wearily. He had long lost the energy to argue with his mother. When Gabina wasn't around, all of his mother's attention focused on him. It didn't just wear him out, it didn't let him live. If he was just a little late at work or somewhere else, his mother would start calling after 3 minutes of delay. Even acquaintances asked him if he had gotten married again. He brushed off the calls, but it was all in vain. His mother was always persistent. How what? You understand, the time she had left is up. Gabina is 100% dead. Come on, Mom, they would have told me. Why would they suddenly do that? Who are you to her? Practically a stranger. Don't forget, you divorced almost a year ago. You were also an idiot, couldn't persuade her not to divorce. Marco sighed again. Mom, but you said back then that everything was very good, we wouldn't have to spend money on a funeral. Idelma looked at him surprised. And what? You could have corrected me. We need to understand that the apartment is going down the drain. I knew your wife worse than you. Marcos grabbed his head. Whatever I do for you, it's never enough. Tell me, Mom, aren't you tired of it? You should go for a walk. Idelma bit her lip. A mother works hard for her idiot son because you can't do anything yourself. She immediately burst into tears, watching her son closely. Mom, I'm sorry, don't cry. What do you suggest we do? She quickly calmed down. Until the court makes a decision, we need to go to that village. Find Gabina's grave, take a photo, so there's evidence, and bring the photo to court. They are probably waiting for her, but don't know that there is no one left to wait for. Marcos understood that his mom was right, but he didn't really want to go there. What if Gabina was alive? Although no, that was nonsense. She was already having trouble walking back then, constantly stopping to rest, and that was a year ago. They probably should go. Okay, Mom, I'll go this weekend. You know what, I'll go with you. Her house is still there, maybe we can sell it too. Mom. What? Will it just fall apart? She had no one but you. And here, his mother was right, but her words made him feel uncomfortable. They decided to leave early Saturday morning to come back as soon as possible. The car had recently been repaired, but Marcos didn't want to spend money on it, so they installed the cheapest parts. Of course, he didn't tell his mother about it. He didn't want her to cancel the trip, and he blamed Gabina for everything. If it wasn't for her, he would have bought a new car a long time ago. He never thought that Gabina was capable of taking the money and then threatening him, but now everyone will get what they deserved. They'll go on the trip on Saturday and justice will prevail. In general, Marcos was already tired of living with his mother. He had a romance at work, but he had nowhere to take the woman because his mother insisted on renting out the free apartment. I don't understand, you have your own room here, you can make money, she said. At first, he liked it. His mother always cooked different things, but then it got old. She watched not only every step, but also every penny. He wanted some certainty, to move out from his mother's place, but he didn't tell her about it because there would be a scandal right away. Sabina, why are you taking so long? Victor, don't distract me. Sabina was recounting the glasses on the table. All right, everyone has enough. I still have some left in reserve. Are you sure? I'm sure. What about you? You're teasing me. Look. Victor made a gesture with his hand. Sabina smiled and looked where he was pointing. Their first big purchase was their big car. It was a passenger car, of course, but with such dimensions and a trunk that half of their home would fit in it. An hour later, the lovers were married. In the next few years, the couple wanted to live in the countryside. Gabina loved the fresh air, and Leandro didn't want to leave his Gabina anywhere. He was taken with great joy to work as a paramedic in the village. Festive tables were set up in the yard of Sabina and Victor. There weren't so many guests invited, only the closest people. Valencia looked out of the house. To be honest, Gabina just wanted to get married quietly, but Leandro, Sabina, Victor, Samantha, and everyone who was part of her life just pounced on her. What, do you want to deprive us of the celebration? How can you not want a wedding, Gabina? What's wrong with you? And then she thought, wouldn't it be more fun to have a party? She remembered how she found out that the illness had receded. On that day, Inocencio Jimenez entered her hospital room, serious and even angry. Leandro was with her, and they both looked at the doctor as if he were a god. They wanted to scream, to not stay silent, to speak up, but Inocencio Jimenez seemed to be intentionally delaying. He sat down, looked him up and down, and said, "Well, what are you waiting for?" Everyone was nervous, but the doctor raised his hand. "Calm down. I must pause to make everything sound as solemn as possible." Gabina quietly said, "You mean to say?" And then Inocencio Jimenez did something that no one expected from him. He jumped up and shouted, "We won. You are the sickest patient I have, and we won." What happened to Gabina then? She cried, laughed, she didn't understand. She couldn't yet understand that she didn't have to die, that she could live how she ever wanted. Now Gabina looked at herself in the mirror. She had chosen a floor-length dress with open shoulders. The dress was blue with a silver sheen. She caught Leandro's admiring gaze in the mirror and turned to him. "How do I look?" "You look stunning," he said. "Gabina, you look super," Victor said from the doorway. He was in a suit and looked important. "Stop talking, the carriage is ready." Gabina was as happy as she was beautiful. She looked at those who had come to congratulate them and smiled. Lately, all she did was smile. How could she not smile when life turned out to be so wonderful? Samantha announced the gift-giving ceremony. They placed them near a small decorated table, and everyone started to make wishes and put envelopes on them. It was so exciting that Gabina lost sight of her now husband. Just as she was about to ask where he had gone, Samantha loudly said, "Every person has a dream, and our bride has one too. Leandro has decided that he should fulfill this dream." In the next moment, Gabina gasped. Leandro was coming towards her, holding a chubby puppy in his arms. He was tiny, about the size of a young lamb. "Here's a gift, you just need to come up with a name." Gabina picked up the little miracle and the miracle licked her cheek, wiping away a tear. "Leandro, you are the best, you are the very best. I love you so much," she said. About an hour into the feast, Gabina addressed the guests. "We have to leave you for a little while, but we'll be back." "Gabina, where are you going?" someone asked. The woman smiled sadly. "I used to live here with my grandmother. She's been gone a long time, but I'm back in her house. Back here where everything reminds me of that life. We're going to the cemetery. I need to tell her that I'm happy." Some wanted to go with them, while others stayed behind at the table. Gabina took the flowers she had prepared beforehand and they set off for the cemetery just beyond the village. The little miracle, for whom Gabina couldn't seem to find a name, ran around them. "Look, some car arrived, guests for someone," Sabina pulled her husband's sleeve. "Well, they arrived, so what? We have our own business to attend to. Little miracle, where are you running off to?" The puppy darted off towards the depths of the cemetery, barking loudly at someone. "I told you, let's ask someone," Marcos's mother said. "Mom, stop calling me an idiot. How do you imagine that? A woman was supposed to die here. Where can we find her grave?" Idelma snorted. "And do you think we should wander around the cemetery for 2 hours looking for God knows what? Maybe she died in the hospital and they buried her in the city. Why didn't you think of that earlier? How can you not be called an idiot if you can't think things through?" Marcos didn't have time to answer her as a puppy came rolling towards them, barking loudly. Ew, scared us. We'll find out everything now. Marcos chuckled. You'll ask the dog? That's very clever, Mom. Idelma sighed. Of course not, you idiot. The puppy is purebred, clean. It's clear he doesn't live here and came with someone. Marcos turned away angrily. He could have figured that out himself. Miracle. Marcos thought he heard a familiar voice, turned around, and saw his mother clutching her heart. Oh my God. Gabina rushed over to them. She was very beautiful, wearing a gorgeous dress. She also saw them and stopped dead in her tracks. The puppy ran towards her, wagging its tail happily. You? Gabina? Marcos already realized that Gabina was not a ghost at all. She was very much real and incredibly beautiful. He wanted to say something, but then a crowd of people approached Gabina. It was clear from their clothing that they were celebrating a wedding, and it was not difficult to figure out whose wedding it was. Gabina, are you getting married? Marcos looked at her confusedly. Yes, is something wrong? Well, since you've recovered, you were supposed to come back to me. He knew he was talking nonsense, but he couldn't help himself. Yes, Gabina had simply deceived him. She was planning to die, but now she was healthy and beautiful. His mother pushed him. Why are you standing like an idiot? You can't do anything in this life, so you'll live with me until the end of your days. My goodness, how could I have given birth to such an idiot? She strode towards the exit. Everyone who was standing next to Gabina stepped aside to let her pass, and Marcos just stood there, staring at them. Finally, Victor said, I think we should go over there. There's nothing here worth paying attention to. Wait, did I get it right? You and your mother were looking for Gabina's grave? Marcos remained silent. He understood perfectly well how it must have looked. To say that he was just taking a walk here would not be entirely appropriate. Victor took a step towards him. You're such a skunk, man. Leandro added. Victor, stop calling him man. He's his mother's kid, a slug. Let's go already. They turned and walked down the path, and after a minute Marcos followed them to the exit. He wanted to cry, to fall to the ground and stomp his feet. But he would prove to everyone that he was a man. Here comes the idiot. Marcos calmly sat behind the wheel and turned to his mother. One more word, and I'll drop you off the car, and you'll have to walk on your own to the city, he said. Idelma was so outraged that even the air was hard to breathe, but something in her son's gaze told her he meant it. She closed her mouth and decided to keep quiet until they reached the city, but then she'll attack him with accusations. All the guests returned to the tables. The dog, who now seemed to be called Miracle, stretched out under the table in the shade. Victor poured glasses of wine. Sabina put down her glass and took a sip of juice. Gabina smiled. Something spectacular was about to happen, and she and Sabina had been keeping the secret as best they could. Leandro had helped her get an ultrasound done at the right time to find out if it was a boy or a girl. Victor looked at his wife in surprise. Why don't you drink to the young couple's health? Don't worry, you have so many helpers here. They'll clean everything up and bring everything out. That's not why I'm not drinking, Sabina replied with a smile. Victor also put down his glass and wiped his suddenly sweaty palms. Why not? Well, why do you think? You asked for a son, and we're having a son. The pause and the look that followed could have made even the most seasoned actor envious. Victor coughed, then suddenly burst into tears and hugged his wife. I thought it would never happen. Sabina was so taken aback, she had never seen Victor cry before. She quickly led him away. Gabina and Leandro stood up awkwardly. He managed to whisper to her, I feel like a teenager. Gabina smiled. Me too. They walked until dawn. The children were exhausted and slept in a pile across the sofa. Miracle sprawled out on his back in the middle. He was also very tired today. Victor had drunk so much that Samantha and Valencia had to help him get to bed. You don't understand. Today is the most important day of my life. Samantha laughed. And when your son is born, what then? Victor was lost in thought. Then it will be more important. I'll go to bed. He gave Sabina a peck. You are my favorite. Sabina laughed. Go to bed already, father of many children. But Victor didn't settle down until he kissed all of his little princesses. Gabina watched it all from the strong embrace of Leandro. A year ago, the world seemed black and white to her, even more black than white. But now she understood that life is beautiful. Happiness can be found at every corner. The main thing is not to run away from it, not to hide. Leandro. Yes? You can't imagine how much I love you. You can't imagine how happy I am. Well, I do imagine it very well. But no matter how much you love me, I love you more. No matter how happy you are, I am still happier. But Leandro, don't argue with me. I am the husband, and it is indecent to argue with the husband. They laughed, and Leandro held her even tighter.
If you're enjoying it as well, leave a like and subscribe.